Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 69 of I Wish You Were Dead, a podcast about things that used to be alive. My name is Mike. Fia has the week off this week, and I am physically touching Gavin's beard right now. Gavin, how you doing?
He sure is. Not only are we in person, we're coming to you live-ish from...
What is live?
About 20 minutes from Sequoia National Park and Kings Canyon National Park. Over here in California. Mike came out for a visit. That is partially the reason why we had episode 67.5 is because we needed to skip a week in order for Mike to be here for episode 69.
Right, we could have done episode 70 together, but
yes.
once Gavin was actually the one that picked up on this opportunity.
That was completely unacceptable.
Once we had the opportunity to have the nicest episode of all together, I mean, I'm not really sure we could pass that up. So we are here, and this is going to be not a normal episode for us. There will be no Today in History. There is no Swamp Corner with Fia. But Gavin, what are we discussing today?
Today we are talking about, in my opinion, one of the greatest films ever made. Ice Age from, I believe, 2005, if I'm not mistaken.
Sometime in like the post-Shrek era of children's movies where you've got like three misfits that are all together. But they all find a way to make it work. I mean, this is kind of right in that genre.
Oh, I was really wrong. 2002.
Really? 2002.
So I don't know how far post-Shrek that
I believe
was.
Shrek was 01, the OG Shrek.
Okay, that makes sense.
I don't know that for sure. But so today we are just doing a breakdown of the movie Ice Age. Gavin has a doc full of notes. I just watched it. I just finished watching it about 5 minutes before we hit the record button here.
Also, by the way, you may or may not hear... other people, potentially a child in the background. We're at a hotel. There's only so much we can do about it. Our apologies.
It kind of fits with with what we're doing here today, though. I mean, Ice Age. For those of you that haven't seen it, spoiler alert, just for this whole episode.
It's a kids movie, and there's a baby.
Yeah, there's a baby, and sometimes the baby cries. So you know what? On brand. I'm gonna take it.
Absolutely. So, a little bit of background. The Ice Age, or as we in paleontology would call it, would be the Pleistocene Epoch. Is a time period that we have talked about a good handful of times on the show. And so this is a time period that ranges from 2.58 million years ago to 11.8 thousand years ago. So basically right up till today. That is the time period where this takes place. Presumably, it takes place actually around 20,000 years ago, because right at the end of the movie, it actually says 20,000 years later. And...
there was no humans shown that, so like it's a little ambiguous, but you would guess about 20,000 years.
Right.
It's kind of the way they implied it.
Which seems to make sense, given some of the animals that we see. We will talk about the animals later, and why most of them don't make sense to actually be in this movie. But first, as always, when we do some kind of movie thing, this is the third movie that we've talked about on the show. The first one was Dinosaur, the Disney movie. The second one was, of course...
The Velocipaster.
The Velocipaster.
Oh my god. Which, if you haven't seen The Velocipaster, you are missing out.
It's, if you have Amazon Prime, you should go watch it. It's easily worth, what was it, like an hour of your time? I think it was almost exactly an hour.
It was a short movie. It was like an hour long. And
this movie is about an hour 20, plus credits. So
right.
So with that, let's get into the plot of the movie. So, Mike, at any point, if you have thoughts, please stop me.
Sure.
So, we start the movie with Scrat, a saber-toothed squirrel. I'll let that hang for a second. Tries to bury an acorn, as squirrels are wont to do, but he tries to bury it in a glacier. He finds a spot that he kind of likes and tries to shove it in the acorn down to the ice, and causes the ice to split in half, and in running away from the glacier, he gets basically like shot out of it like a cannon into a migrating herd of various animals, almost none of which actually lived during the Pleistocene. And then we get the opening credits. So
when it comes to the actual plot of this movie, Scrat shows up in the beginning, at the end a couple times. Doesn't actually do much for the plot, if I remember correctly.
No, he does one thing for the plot.
Well, are we going to get there?
Yeah, we'll talk about
it. All right, we'll do it. All right.
Yeah, he's just kind of the side character. And I think by far the most popular character in this series.
I think so, absolutely.
I love Scrat. He doesn't actually speak, to my knowledge, ever. And he even has like several animated
shorts. Not with words,
shorts.
But like he speaks, through personality.
Oh, of course. So, like I said, we get the opening credits, and then we get views of many literally and figuratively displaced animals moving through the herd including so like I said, I'll go over the list of animals and sort of what they are after the plot recap, but for now I'll mention one or two here or there. We get some Paleotherium children playing Extinction in a tar pit. they're just rolling around in this tar pit being like, no, help. And then the dad comes over and is like, guys, we gotta go, quit screwing around. And they just get up out of the tar pit and leave, which I thought was so funny.
Yep. You can play Extinction later, I believe was the quote.
Yeah.
Yes.
Walking the opposite direction of the rest of the herd, we meet Manny, our protagonist woolly mammoth, who gets yelled at by that same Paleotherium father and says, Manny replies, if my trunk was that small, I wouldn't draw attention to myself, pal.
Which is just a great little nugget of adult humor. There's a little bit of that.
There's a bit of it in this movie, yeah.
Yes.
And then in my notes, I have that quote, and then just incredible.
Yeah.
Love it. We're rolling.
We shoulder on.
So after that, we cut to Sid, the ground sloth, who is for some reason sleeping in a tree. They never really mention that he's a ground sloth. Just they keep calling him a sloth, so I figure they probably had to show him in a tree at some point just for people to be like, okay, I guess this is a sloth.
Mm-hmm.
But he is a ground sloth, which did not live in trees.
What kind of sloths did live in trees?
The kind we have today.
which are called what?
Tree sloths.
Okay, fair enough.
No
further questions.
No, we have two groups. There's 3-toed and 2-toed sloths.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember which one, but one of them is reasonably closely related to a major group of ground sloths. Okay. So this is just the one weirdo that happened to be living in the trees, and they're the ones that made it.
Gotcha, okay.
So, but yeah, Sid's for some reason sleeping in a tree. He wakes up to realize that all of his relatives have left on the migration without him.
Not for the first time.
No, and I'll discuss that later.
Okay.
Naturally, for an early 2000s movie for children, while complaining about it, he steps in poop left behind by the herd. Peak comedy.
Mm-hmm.
In wiping the poop off of his feet, he wipes it all over the food of some Rhino/Brontotheres. More on that later. Named Frankencarl. While wiping the poop all over their food, he actually gets some on Carl's face as well. He reminds the rhinos that they have tiny brains and that they probably can't even barely understand what he's saying.
There was no need to do that, by the way.
He just did that.
Sid, again, if it's been a while since you've seen the movie, or for some reason you haven't seen the
movie.
Played
by John Leguizamo, by the way.
Right. Just one of these morons that can't keep their mouth shut, and it's a stream of consciousness. Yep. Anything that comes to mind, it comes out. A little bit of a sloth after my own heart, I'd have to say.
Mm-hmm. And then, the icing on the cake, he eats their last dandelion, the last one of the season.
Yes.
That I think it was Carl was very excited about. Sid, realizing his mistake, tries to convince them that pine cones are just as good as the leafy greens, which does not work for obvious reasons.
Yep.
And then they chase Sid, trying to kill him, into Manny, played by Ray Romano. The rhinos, question mark? And I'm going to keep saying rhinos, question mark, because I don't recognize either of what these are actually supposed to be. But
yeah, the rhino adjacent, I would have to say.
Right.
And
again, we'll talk about animal stuff later.
Right.
But yeah, very confused. So they try to get Manny to give them Sid, because Sid's like hiding behind him.
And Manny, at this point, is the woolly mammoth, and yes. I guess the main protagonist of the film. I mean, it's a group effort.
I'd say it goes back and forth between him and Sid.
Yeah, that's fair.
But Sid, or Manny being a mammoth, isn't really afraid of the rhinos. He's, a full-grown mammoth.
Right.
So they try to attack him, and he literally picks them each up and throws them. Sid decides to stick with Manny for the protection, as Manny heads north for the winter. Manny doesn't really make it clear, or Manny makes it very clear that he does not like Sid.
Yep.
Then, we cut to a human settlement where a little baby boy is learning to walk with his mom and dad, and then it scrolls to reveal that this cute, very wholesome scene is being watched by a group of saber-toothed cats with gigantic chins. I don't know why they animated them like this. All of them have like massive chins.
They hang down in a way that sort of looks cool, but also is wild the more you think about it.
I think they kind of had to do it to make them talk realistically, but also it makes it look like their teeth are their saber teeth are smaller than they should be, because their chin is at the end of their saber teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And to me that looks less frightening than it should, because their teeth should be sticking out a solid couple inches below their chin. because of just how big those friggin' teeth are.
I mean, I still think they look pretty, pretty scary as is, but I
Yeah.
see what you're going for just by comparison.
But yeah, so the leader of these saber-toothed cats, Soto, reveals that the dad that we just saw with the little boy killed basically half of their pack and tells Diego, one of the other cats, to get the others ready to attack the settlement and to bring him the baby alive as repayment for his lost packmates. We cut back to Manny and Sid building a shelter, as animals do. Animals don't build shelters, but I guess when they speak, they sure do.
I mean, like, birds build a nest, and that's kind of like a shelter.
I guess. Like, yeah, there are some animals that do, but they were carrying, like, logs.
Yes.
So, like, Manny put some logs over top of, like, a crevice and some rocks and built himself a house. And so, while Manny's carrying these logs, Sid has a single stick, claiming that he's going to use the stick to create fire. Sid says, quote, "We'll see if brains triumph over brawn, won't we?" unquote. And then it hard cuts to Sid rubbing two sticks together in the pouring rain.
Middle of a monsoon.
And just very pitifully, very weakly, just rubbing them together to try and make fire, while Manny's just sitting there watching him struggle from his nice, covered shelter.
Mm-hmm.
Sid then tries to get Manny to let him in to his shelter and Manny asks if he can go annoy his family or some other, quote, poisonous reptiles. Common thing, mistaking venomous for poisonous, but moving on.
Couldn't let that one go, could you?
Sure couldn't. Sid explains that his family left him and the previous year had tied his legs and feet together and gagged him with a field mouse. This time they just left him in a tree, so apparently they were like, I guess we'll just leave this time. Yeah. He found us anyway, like he found his way back to him. He's like,
apparently.
So they're like, what's the trouble worth? We'll just leave. Because Manny brought up Sid's family, Sid asked about Manny's family. Manny looks angry and turns around at the shelter. Turns around so he's like facing inside the shelter, so basically his butt is to Sid. Still without a shelter. And then I think Sid uses Manny's tail as like a little umbrella. Then we hard cut back to Scrat, trying to find another place to stash an acorn. He finds a spot on the top of a tree and gets struck by lightning as he raises it above his head. Once again, peak comedy.
Yes.
Again, Scrat's just around, but never relevant to the plot.
Except for apparently once that you're going to tell me about.
I sure will.
Okay.
Then we cut back to the cats, who attack the settlement as the pack fights off the men of the camp. All of the women and the children sort of run away. Actually, we really only see the one woman and the baby. I don't think we ever see anyone else.
I was going to say, it doesn't...
That is not a man.
I think you're correct on that.
But anyway, as the pack fights off the men, Diego goes after the baby, which gets carried away by the mom that we saw earlier. Diego chases her to a waterfall where the mom jumps off dramatically with the baby because she doesn't want the baby to be eaten. Diego tells Soto that he lost the baby as they retreat from the camp, and Soto says that if he doesn't bring him the baby, that he will be the replacement. So, we then find the dad pick up a necklace that was on the baby that had fallen off before the mom jumped off the waterfall. So, in the dad's mind, the cats killed the baby and the mom.
Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, is a reasonably fair assumption.
Yes. Then all of the men basically pick up, their spears and give chase after all the cats and set off on a hunt throughout the entire movie to hunt these cats as repayment for attacking their camp.
I mean, you say that, but we don't really see the humans come up a whole lot.
There is one point, I don't think I have it in my notes, but where the dad very clearly wants to go one way, but the rest of the people, and it's also said that the humans have another camp at another location.
Right.
And so I think the dad wants to head one direction where it looks like the cats are, but the humans have to get, winter is coming, so they have to get to their other settlement before it gets too wintry. So the dad sort of gives up on his tracking of the cats and goes with the other humans.
Right, but the vast majority of this movie is sans humans, except for the one baby.
Yeah, and it's very funny. I don't have this in my notes either, but at the end, very funnily, Diego says, "Come on, Sid, humans can't talk."
Yes, I did catch that.
Yep. But Diego splits off from the rest of the cats to track the baby. We cut back to Sid and Manny talking about mating for life, for whatever reason. And Manny then freezes as he sees the mom and the baby in the river. The mom is clearly hurt, but she manages to slide the baby up the riverbank to Manny, and Manny takes the baby and just sort of looks at it, like, what? And then Sid looks back to where the mom was, and the mom is gone, presumably washed down the river, dead. Manny goes to just leave the baby behind, And Sid is like, you just saved it, man. Like, are we just going to leave it?
Yeah, right. You've already done the hard part. Like,
Right. So Sid looks up toward the waterfall and sees some smoke from the settlement where the baby's herd is. They keep calling it the baby's herd. The herd of humans.
I mean, sure.
Yeah, it's weird. They very frequently refer to humans as we typically refer to animals, which I think is really funny.
It's a nice touch.
Yeah. So he wants to return the baby, and so Sid wants to climb the waterfall, and it does not go well for him. Manny basically says, "I'm still trying to get rid of the last thing that I saved, which would be Sid."
Yep.
And so Manny basically is like, if you're doing this by yourself. Sid tries to climb the waterfall with the baby and fails miserably while Manny just kind of hangs out and watches for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And as he is maybe like a third to halfway up the waterfall, a solid 50 feet maybe, Sid drops the baby. And as Manny goes to catch it, Diego jumps out of nowhere and catches the baby in his mouth.
Diego being one of the saber-toothed cats. Can I say saber-toothed tiger?
Cats.
Saber-toothed cat.
They call them tigers.
Right.
That's what most people would call them. That's not correct.
Understood. So, saber-toothed cat Diego shows up, who was, his job is to basically go about trying to kill the baby.
Well, he wants to bring the baby back.
Bring the baby back alive, yes.
Yes. Because the main leader wants to be the one to kill the baby.
Right.
And so Diego catches the baby, but somehow Manny gets it back. I didn't really catch how that happened, but he does. And Diego, being a single saber-toothed cat, realizes there's no way he can get this baby back like from a mammoth. Like, that's just not something he can do. Yeah. So then he tries to sort of talk his way out of it, and he tries to reason with Manny. And then I have in my notes, Diego makes a gay joke.
What was the joke? Yes.
It was something like,
I remember what this was.
You can't have one of your own, so you're gonna adopt, or something to that effect.
Something to that effect. Especially for 2002. All right,
right. I mean, it was like I said, there are several like adult humor parts that are kind of veiled. Yeah. This is like a veiled kind of gay joke.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I would be very interested to hear from any of our listeners from the LGBTQ plus community on this one. I didn't feel like this was super offensive.
No,
but I am open to being told otherwise on that. It was
absolutely.
I found it as a nice reference, but yes, I did catch that as well.
And then after that, for some reason, Manny agrees to take the baby back to its herd with Sid, on the condition that Sid leaves him alone afterward. So Diego does not convince him to give him the baby, unsurprisingly. They get up to the area with the smoke to find the settlement destroyed from the cat's attack. They don't know that, but Diego then pops up again and tries to convince them that he was going to take the baby back to its herd because he can track the humans. Manny lets Diego go with them to the humans because he says that they're headed to another settlement that will be blocked with snow in the next day or so, and if they don't make it, they'll be stuck with the kid and also Sid. And the reason they let Diego go with them is because he's a predator. He can track them.
Right.
We then get a walking montage with the baby crying the whole time. Manny realizes that it's wearing a diaper, and they make Sid change it. I think partially because they don't say this, but I'm like, he's the only one with hands.
that is sort of unspoken, but I'm not really sure. I guess, they show
Manny probably could have with his trunk.
Yeah, pretty dexterous with his trunk, so that's possible. But yeah, I wouldn't.
It's mostly because Sid, you suck. Yeah. You're changing the baby's diaper. He plays a poop joke on Manny, peak 2002 comedy, which makes Manny hit Sid, which then stops the baby from crying, so they beat up Sid to keep the kid quiet. The kid then continues to keep crying, and they realize that it might be hungry, so they walk around and find a single melon, which then gets stolen by a dodo. And I knew that the dodos showed up in these movies. I forgot it was this one. I thought it was a sequel. But I love the dodos. They're so funny. They follow the dodo and find a cult/militia camp. The dodos are doomsday prepping, and they're marching in lines. They're
they're not good at it.
No, they're really bad.
Yeah.
And so also I call them conspiracy dodos in my notes as well, because they keep talking about doom is coming, the ice age is here, prepare for the ice age. The gang asked for the melon back, and the dodos chant at them, doom on you. Through a contrived series of events, basically all the Dodos die, and the scene is way more epic than it has any right to be.
Yeah.
And they get the melon. Basically, feed the baby. Everything's all happy.
You're forgetting the best part of the scene, though, when after Sid's able to finally procure the melon, he's dancing with it as though he's a football player that had a touchdown, and in typical football player fashion, he spikes the watermelon and cracks it open for no reason at all.
Right, and then they're really mad, but then the baby just crawls over and starts eating the watermelon because it's watermelon.
Yes, and everybody's happy.
Yep. Bedtime now, after the day's exciting events.
Yes.
While everyone is asleep, Diego obviously tries to steal the baby because...
That's his
obviously, that's his job. But Manny has him wrapped up in his trunk while they're all sleeping, so he basically fails. He can't steal the baby at this point. But he hears some rustling over, a little ways away, so he goes over there. He finds two of his pack mates that came to deliver a message from Soto that even though it's been less than a day, Soto is tired of waiting.
Right.
And Diego says that he's on his way with the baby and also a mammoth for them to kill. But they'll need the whole pack, for this big score. So he's basically setting up Manny and also Sid, but I guess a sloth isn't worth all that much to them.
Right.
So setting up the gang to be ambushed later.
This is partially to give him some time to work his magic, but even like early on here, you can sort of see some hints of Diego being kind of pulled into this this new hodgepodge of a pack or tribe.
Yeah. So when the gang wakes up, the baby is missing. Manny, of course, blames Diego, but they realize Sid is also missing. And guess what Sid's doing? As any eligible bachelor would, he is using the baby to pick up chicks. Soaking in a hot tub full of mud.
By the way.
Yeah, he seems to do pretty well.
Yeah.
And so there's a scene. So Manny discovers the baby's missing, goes and takes the baby from Sid, and Sid's like, "Oh no, I need that." So, which leaves the two lady sloths that were soaking in this hot tub of mud alone to chat for a second. We get basically them a fun line with like all the sensitive ones get eaten.
Mm-hmm. And they never at one point comment on the fact that this other sloth is holding a non-sloth and in fact a human baby.
Yeah,
they're totally cool with that. It's it is the greatest thing in the world for them.
So, Manny finds them, takes the baby, and Sid obviously, like I said, he wants to get it back, but Manny obviously refuses. Sid goes back to try again with just his good looks. I'll let that hang there. He hops back into the hot tub, only to find who? Not the two sloths, but those same two rhinos from earlier.
Yup. They're back.
Manny bonds with the baby a bit, while Sid is chased by the rhinos. Sid runs into Diego, while Diego's also looking for them and the baby. And they make it look like Diego killed and ate Sid already, so the rhinos get bored and leave. Brilliant plan.
Absolutely, and it works.
Yeah. Then, a walking/bonding montage with the gang is, happens with Send Me On My Way by Rusted Root playing. That's the first time I'd ever heard the songs when I heard this as a kid. And it's an excellent song.
Absolutely. Excellent song, and it fits well with this. I think that song, it can be overdone. You can overdo it. I think it is very tastefully used in this particular movie.
So, Sid gets hurt a lot during this montage. He's very often the punching bag in this movie.
Yep.
During this montage, they find, among other things, Old Faithful.
Yes.
And at one point, Sid sits on it, and I guess Manny and Diego had been sitting there watching it, because they count it down to like 3, 2, 1, and it launches Sid into the air. And then Manny and Diego walk away, and Manny says, "Sure is faithful."
Very nice. Excellent. Just tastefully done.
And then a little bit later, they walk by Stonehenge.
Yep.
And Manny says, "Modern architecture. It'll never last."
Mm-hmm.
Which, to my knowledge, they're on North America. That's what makes the most sense to me. Stonehenge is famously not on that continent. But, sure.
Call it a plot hole, move on.
So, toward the end of this montage, they find Scrat, the one time he's being plot relevant, and interacting with any other characters. The other times he's just kind of doing stuff by himself.
Yep.
So they find Scrat, and he plays charades to trying to tell them. They ask for directions.
I remember this now. Yes.
Yeah. So Manny thinks Diego's lost. So Manny asks Scrat for directions, and he plays charades because he doesn't speak for some reason, trying to tell them that Diego's pack is up ahead, but Diego gets rid of him before they can figure it out.
Right.
By the
Diego obviously doesn't want them to find out
Yes.
that the pack is ahead because, then they'll know, oh,
Exactly.
like they're going to eat us.
Yep. By the end of the montage, they actually catch up to the humans, but Diego sees them first and makes up a shortcut through a cave. They end up getting trapped in the cave by some falling snow after Diego yells at Sid. In the cave, Sid gets lost for a little bit, and this is one of my favorite parts of the movie. So they're in this cave that's mostly made out of ice. And frozen in the ice, Sid finds many things, including some kind of scary fish,
Yes.
some kind of big theropod dinosaur, probably supposed to be T-Rex,
Mm-hmm.
a series of animals frozen together in a sort of rise of man, that sort of diagram of like the
Mm-hmm.
monkey to chimp to caveman to human sort of thing, with Sid at the end being like
Right.
the man
Right.
one, which I thought was really funny.
Really funny, really well done. Again, one of those little nuggets that
Mhm.
you notice, you wouldn't have noticed, when we were first,
Right.
7 watching this movie.
And then also a UFO, just a whole UFO that nobody else seems to acknowledge except the baby who holds up the Spock
Yep.
live long and prosper sort of thing. Sure. The baby somehow ends up sliding down an ice tube and, gets separated from the gang, and they all race to save it, with Manny not wanting Diego to get there first. And the baby has a great time during this entire scene.
Mhm.
Everybody else is real stressed trying to get to the baby, and the baby's just sliding around on all the ice, having a great time.
Yes.
They finally get the baby, and then they see some cave paintings in the wall, and we get some exposition about why Manny is alone. Because I think at a couple times they mentioned that mammoths don't travel alone, typically.
Yes, I think one of the rhinos may have mentioned that at
Yeah.
one point. Or no, it was one of the Saber-Toothed cats.
I think the rhinos might have mentioned it at the beginning,
Okay.
too. But yeah, later on they mentioned that. Or either way, yeah. It's been mentioned multiple times.
Correct.
TLDR, his family was killed by humans when he was very little, but they show it all through, like, cave art style paintings, which
Mhm.
is really cool. I really like that scene.
It's cool, it's well done, and like I said, me and Gavin were talking right before we recorded. I think it's one of those things that it shows there was some forethought setting up
Yeah.
potential sequels where they have this kind of storyline just kind of hanging out there. They don't fully discuss it or act upon it in this episode or in this film, but it sets up the future film series. And for those of you that don't know, there's been 4, 5, 6 Ice Age
Yeah,
movies. There's been
something like that.
There's been a bunch of them, and so it's I can appreciate little nuggets of that
Mhm.
that get picked up instead of just like a whole new movie and a whole new series of problems.
Well, it also does sort of set up the later, like, sort of found family
Right.
sort of dynamic of our little herd here.
Right.
So after we get that, and I don't really think that's never really shown to Sid or Diego, really. That's mostly for the viewer.
It is.
I feel like it's a little implied, but they never really say anything to acknowledge that they understood.
It seems as though Diego had some idea something was going on because Sid was being like, "Oh my God,
Yeah,
look,
Sid
it's
was being Sid and blathering.
right. Oh, look, it's a mammoth. It's a family of mammoths, and it looks like there's humans and they're hunting." And Diego basically gives him the whole, "Hey, knock it
Like,
off."
hey, man.
Right, and it seemed as though Diego knew that this might hit a little too close to home, but
Yeah.
yes, the full context is mostly left for the viewer.
Yeah. So the gang makes it out of this cave, pretty much right near, because I don't think Diego had like any idea that this was an actual shortcut. He just needed to stall to get them away from the humans.
Yes.
But the cave happens to open up basically right where Diego wanted them to be.
Or where he said they wanted him to be.
Yeah, so they were going to basically right where Diego's pack is. Also near where the humans are headed. So while walking on the snow, Sid realizes that his feet feel hot even though he's walking on snow, which is weird. And the gang realize that they're walking over a volcano?
This was a little out there.
Yeah, I feel like that plays into a very long-standing trope. It's like with anything paleontology, there needs to be a volcano. That's like a very long-standing thing that's very classic in like paleo art. Anytime you see dinosaurs, especially, but anything prehistoric, it's volcanoes.
I mean, to go back to children's movies from around this time, you have just reminded me, this is only tangentially related because you started talking about volcanoes, and I thought about it. Do you remember seeing Spy Kids 3D?
Sure do.
Do you remember at one point in there where they go, it's a video game, so they have to have, like, lava? And at one point, one of the nerds was just like, actually, this one movie, they have magma, not lava.
So this is, in fact, lava. It is above the ground,
Yes.
so it is lava. But, so, they realize they're walking over a volcano. Manny at one point, falls into the lava on a block of ice after risking his life to save Diego. Manny was already home free, but he went back to save Diego, and in doing so, falls down while standing on a block of ice, and somehow standing on the block of ice made it evaporate, and it launched him back up into the air, and he landed completely fine, mostly.
He was a little woozy at first, but
Right, and I'm like, yeah, that's totally how volcanoes work. Sure. And after this, Diego, this is the first like real appearance of him like being like super like, oh man, I can't actually lead these guys to this
Right.
trap. And so there's still a bit of a walk after that from the ambush spot. So a storm comes through as they get really close to the final spot, and Sid accidentally makes fire, like he said he was going to do at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
He drew a cave sloth on the wall. He was like, sloths are never in these cave paintings, so I'm going to draw one.
Mm-hmm.
And in drawing one, he makes some sparks and makes a fire by accident. The baby takes its first steps as they're just sort of hanging out by the fire. Very cute. Diego has more second thoughts because Sid is like, oh, come here. And it turns and goes to Diego instead. Very cute. As the gang gets closer to the ambush spot, Diego tells them about the ambush because he's now fully in cold feet, sort of scenario. Ice Age pun not intended.
And at this point, Manny and Sid are just like, wait, what?
Yeah.
You get away from us. We don't want anything to do with you.
Mm.
And like, understandably so. And basically, Diego's like, I'm your only hope, man.
Right. Because Diego doesn't say like how many, but he's basically like, you're not going to make it without me. Like, you need my help to help trick them. And so Diego goes back to his pack, and they see Sid carrying what they think is the baby. But he's shuffling his feet through the deep snow, and as the pack gets close, he reveals that he has pieces of wood strapped to his feet, and he skis down the snow away from them. At one point, one of his skis breaks off, so it turns into a snowboard. With a fake baby, so when the cats finally catch up to him, they find out that it's just some snowballs wrapped in like the cloth that the baby had.
Mm-hmm.
And so after that, we see Diego and Manny walking through the spot where they were supposed to ambush them. Diego tricks one of the saber-toothed cats into attacking earlier than the leader wanted them to, ruining the ambush. And Manny basically fights off some of the cats. And then Diego turns on his packmates, and him and Manny get in this big fight with Soto, the leader, and a couple of the others whose names I don't remember. One of them played by Jack Black for some reason.
Really? Oh, I totally missed that.
The kind of crazy one.
Oh, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of
doesn't sound like him at all, though.
A lot of these saber-toothed cats, like, they look pretty dopey.
Yeah. One is like kind of like big and chunky. One looks like he's like, especially in his eyes, he's got like big bags under his eyes for some reason.
A couple of them look like, how do I say this?
They're very like Three Stooges kind of esque.
Three Stooges kind of. A couple of them, like, I have seen this kind of kid before in elementary schools or elementary age. Just cannot sit still.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying here.
Sure do. And so Diego sacrifices himself during the fight, and Manny basically then is 1-on-1 versus Soto, and a saber-toothed cat versus a mammoth is not close.
Right. Versus one saber-toothed cat.
Yes. And so, not wanting any of its protagonists to be murderers, the movie has Manny knock Soto into a wall where he's killed by falling ice. It doesn't show him dying, but it's very implied. Diego sort of dies, and basically is like, go on without me.
Right.
That whole shtick. And basically tells them they have to go catch up to the humans, or else, they're not going to make it because of, the snow. So Manny, Sid, and the baby catch up to the humans. The baby is returned to its dad. It is very cute.
Very cute, very sad because the baby's grown close with, this oddball family, but it is for the best, and the family walks away.
Yeah. After the humans leave, the gang turns around and sees Diego still alive. And the gang all head south like normal animals should, instead of Manny, who was heading north for whatever reason. That's never explained.
Yeah, it seemed like he just wanted to be on his own. Like,
yeah.
I think that's the best of it. Like, he was curmudgeon, didn't want to be around people. Again, to make the Shrek comparison,
Yeah, that's fair.
Right.
And so the last time we see our three main protagonists, Sid makes a global warming joke, which was very prescient for 2002, I thought.
Yeah, well done. This is pretty inconvenient truth and everything. Like,
well, and it's like, if this came out in 2002, voice acting's typically done, at least like a year or two beforehand, because it takes a while to animate, you know. So this was, at probably around 2000 or so when they recorded it.
Well done.
So that's the last we see of our three main protagonists. But as I said, there is a 20,000 years later thing. Because the last time we saw Scrat is when Diego sort of got him out of there, and he basically, fell down a hill and rolled into a giant snowball, that whole shtick.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see, it says 20,000 years later, we see Scrat frozen in ice, washing up on a beach on some tropical island with his acorn.
Also frozen in the same block of ice.
Yes. The acorn thaws out first, and Scrat, his torso is free, but his legs and tail are still frozen in the ice. The acorn gets washed away by the tide. He freaks out and Hulk busts out of the ice, runs over to a tree and starts bashing his head against it because he lost his acorn, and finds a coconut. And this is the holy grail for him because it's a giant acorn, I guess. He tries to find a place to bury or smash the coconut into the ground, and basically does a repeat of the beginning, but instead of cracking a glacier apart, he cracks this volcanic island apart, and a big volcano erupts, and that is how this movie ends.
Yep, again, that last part there, you could have done without it from a plot point of view, but damn it, it was fun, and I'm glad that it was there.
That is the plot of Ice Age, wrapped up in 30 minutes or so.
So there you go. So now, Gavin.
Yes.
I assume that we wanted to watch this movie for some sciencey kind of reasons.
We did.
To break it down. So
there isn't a whole lot of it, spoilers.
I was going to say, let it, maybe these pseudoscience might be a better way to phrase it. What was going on in this movie? Did they get anything right?
Yes and no. So I will start with I'll just go through the animals in order of appearance.
Okay.
So first we see Scrat, which is on the Wikipedia listed as a saber-toothed squirrel.
I remember seeing that at one point when I was looking up something else. That's not a thing.
That doesn't exist, no.
Okay.
First of all, squirrels have buck teeth. Their incisors are really big. Scrats are not. Squirrels don't have canine teeth. They just don't have them. At least on their upper jaws. I don't remember for sure about the lower jaws, but Scrat's fangs, the saber teeth, are on the upper jaw. I actually went down a couple of rabbit holes and tried to find, is this remotely based on anything? Mm-hmm. It's there are a couple species of rodent that have big canine teeth like that, but not nearly to that extent, and they're not squirrels. So that's just...
This is a fever dream somebody had.
Yes. Still, incredibly fun character, though. I love Scrat.
Absolutely.
The next, speaking animal is a very camel-like, weird ungulate creature from South America called Macrauchania. They look like camels but have sort of a taper trunk on their face. And so they open the movie with one of them being well, how do we know it's an ice age? And then its buddy was because of all the ice, man. Yeah. So
never seen or heard from again after this, but still.
No, we see them in the herd scenes at the beginning. Yeah.
Well, right, just the beginning, but after the beginning, right.
I think they show up in the sequels. But like I said, they lived in South America, and to my knowledge, never made it to North America. There's a couple of things from South America that made it north, including ground sloths, actually, but to my knowledge, they never made it. Mm-hmm. And they went extinct by the late Pleistocene, so it's depending on when exactly that is, that technically time-wise might line up.
You can sort of give them partial credit at least for that.
I guess. As I mentioned earlier, we have Paleotherium, which is a perissodactyl, so related to things like horses, rhinos, tapirs. That looks very taper-like. It's got a very taper-like trunk, as Manny pointed out. If my trunk was that small, I wouldn't draw attention to myself. But based on everything that I saw, looking up the animal itself, that doesn't seem to be a thing anymore. The species, yes, but it having a trunk doesn't seem to be a thing. In the movie, it basically makes them look like pigs with little trunks, more or less, right?
That's a good way to put it.
That seems about right, proportion-wise. I think we're a little more stout and chubby than what I actually saw the actual animal is, but that could be any number of things. For a while, I actually thought it was supposed to be an elephant ancestor, which it's apparently not supposed to be. And Paleotherium didn't also live at the same time, not terribly far off, but also not super close. So this one I don't give them any credit for it.
I mean, part of it, just like spoiler alert here, there is no attempt at this to be...
No, not at all.
You are not watching this kind of movie hoping for any kind of scientific accuracy. You are
No.
suspending disbelief and you are enjoying yourself. Just to
Absolutely.
make that clear, this is not like us crapping on a children's movie.
No.
For not being scientifically accurate.
No, I love this movie.
We do this a lot. We are doing this for the sake of the fact we have a science podcast.
Absolutely. We see Glyptodon, who I think also become much like more important characters in the sequels. But it is a giant armadillo relative that is basically like the size of like the sort of old school style like Volkswagen bugs.
Mm-hmm.
But they have like a club tail with spikes on it, which they really had. That was a real animal. Those actually I think were pretty good. Except their teeth. They were all the two that we see are shown to have like big buck teeth.
Okay.
Which is not a thing. Spoilers, none of the animals in this movie had correct teeth, or even close.
I assume that's a lot of times for, like you said before, like talking.
Yeah, talking, and also just making them look more normal to have like expressive faces.
Right.
Pretty much anything, like, it gets into a little bit of like that uncanny valley, because at one point I was looking at Manny's teeth, and elephants and their relatives we've talked about before in our episode about elephants, and I reference that episode a lot, so I really should know what episode number that is, but if you want to listen to it, you'll find it. But they famously only have one tooth in each sort of section of their mouth. So they have one tooth in the upper right, upper left, lower right, lower left, and then obviously their tusks. But they gave him basically human teeth, and it got into that uncanny valley where I'm like, I don't like this.
A little bit, and you get used to it, but yes.
Right, and they don't show it much because he's got hair and the tusks get in the way.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's the couple times that I do, I'm like, that makes me uncomfy.
Right, and it's one of those things. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's hard.
Right.
It's hard to figure out, but yeah.
So Glyptodon actually has a pretty good record in southern North America from this time. So that one is.
What was it, Glyptodon?
The Volkswagen bug beat the big shelled things.
Yeah. Okay.
One of them jumps off a cliff, being like, "I'm flying."
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so a little more north than they probably should be. They didn't really do much with like glaciers or anything, but I'll give that's a solid benefit of the doubt.
Right.
We see some things that I saw listed on Wikipedia. The Wikipedia page, like the Ice Age wiki, is like really bad. Nothing on it is correct or even close. So I saw some things listed as aardvarks, which makes absolutely no sense. I also saw them in several places they were listed as aardvarks. In one place, those same animals were listed as anteaters, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense, but it makes more sense. So I'm gonna go with anteaters.
Is it the Wikipedia that's the problem, or are they credited like that in the actual?
I don't know. I don't think it's actually ever said anywhere.
Right, but like, is it
maybe on like the DVD,
or maybe the credits of the
like
film?
that?
Yeah, I don't know.
No, in the credits it does not.
Really?
Yeah, I checked.
Well, then in that case, I got nothing.
Yeah. So, anyway, they have a long, skinny snout and a long, furry tail. I think they say like one line, and that's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're supposed to be aardvarks, they really got that one wrong.
Yeah.
Aardvarks, to my knowledge, have no fossil record outside of Africa.
None?
None. They are, and don't even have a good fossil record in Africa, to my knowledge.
Is there a reason for that?
No.
Or just luck of the draw? Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the groups that I think just historically has just been like consistently around, never really done great or super diverse. But I mean, they're doing fairly decently well today, to my knowledge.
Right.
But yeah, so anteaters makes more sense because those are at least from South America.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have woolly mammoths, which obviously makes a lot of sense for this time. But something I wanted to clarify just for reiteration's sake from the elephant episode, woolly mammoths are not the only type of mammoth. There were several species of mammoth.
Right. And
to my knowledge, woolly mammoths are the only ones that were woolly.
Were they around during this period of time, though?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. They were probably on the decline, which I think is also implied in the movie because we don't see any other mammoths. They
were all heading south.
Right, but even in the rest of the herd, we didn't see
That's right, yes.
anything. Sid is supposed to be a type of ground sloth in the genus Megalonyx, which I believe just means big claw.
Mm-hmm.
and actually I told Mike this today, but I don't think it's ever said what species of Megalonyx Sid is supposed to be, but there's a species of Megalonyx that was named by former President Thomas Jefferson.
Yes.
There's Jefferson's ground sloth, which is Megalonyx jeffersoni. I don't believe Sid is one of those, but I also don't know enough to say whether he was or not. So
I'd like to pretend he is, just
Sure.
for the sake of me being a co-host on this podcast.
absolutely, we'll take it. And now the rhino things. These are the ones that I have the most to say about, actually.
Really?
Yeah, so there's two of them. So one of them, Frank, has a relatively skinny but long Y-shaped horn coming off the nose.
Right.
And then another very small horn coming off of his forehead. Almost like a Triceratops nose horn, but coming off of its forehead. And then Carl has a Y-shaped but much like thicker, blunter Y shape coming off his nose and nothing on his forehead. I was not able to find any rhino that had anything like either of these.
Yeah, it's one of those things, you look at it, you think rhino immediately, and then you start looking at it more and you're like, this is...
They also had some uncanny valley human teeth going on there.
Yeah.
But,
again, fun characters, like, real funny, but like...
Well, they look to me much more like Brontotheres, which are...
Sure, I know what that is.
So they are a group, in the same broad group, they're perissodactyls like rhinos are, but they're more closely related to horses than they are to rhinos. Although they look very rhino-like, they're big and beefy like that. But whereas rhino horns, as we talked about in the rhino episodes, are made out of keratin, not any actual bones. So if you were to see a rhino skull, there'd be no evidence that there was, no bone evidence that there was a horn there, other than some like rough bumpiness on like the snout. But Brontotheres, their horns had like a skeletal base inside, almost like a cow horn, that then probably had some keratin on the outside. So that's and they tended to have Y-shaped horns like that, or several of them did. So that's what I think that they were supposed to be, but it was really confusing, especially because Brontotheres went extinct like 40 million years ago or so, in that ballpark. Not close at all.
Yeah, not 20,000 years ago?
No, not close at all. So, yeah, really confused by these two. I want to say they show up in one of the sequels, but I don't know that for sure. After that, we have the humans. I don't know enough about archaic human societies to have much to say about anything about them. They do show very caveman typical sort of tropes, though. They had very big eyebrow ridges, very like large sloped noses.
Right.
Typical caveman stuff.
Yeah, and don't look to me on this one. This is well before when my knowledge of history would begin. So
sure.
Yeah, they are human. I don't even want to say like primitive humans, but like pre-farming humans, it would seem.
Yeah.
So use that for whatever you want.
Let's see. We have Smilodon, which is your saber-toothed cats. Like I said, in the movie they kept calling them saber-toothed tigers, which I feel like this movie is a big part of why people call them that.
I would say so, because I had no idea they weren't saber-toothed tigers.
No, so there are two main groups of cats, like large-scale groups of cats. Yeah. So there is the group that we have today, that are the felines, and then there is the other side that were the saber-toothed cats and their relatives, the Machaerodontines.
Okay.
And so the complete opposite side of like the cat family tree. Not tigers at all. Much more similar, in fact, to lions.
Really?
Yeah. Just like structurally, like their arms are much more beefy. Okay. Because they're like wrestlers. They're grapplers. They would grab something and wrestle it down, and then we still don't really know what they use the teeth for, to be honest. Like, we have good thoughts.
Eating, maybe?
Well, right, but it's like they seem like really fragile, so it's like, and they don't grow back. So it's like if you break it, it's broken, So it's like it's hard to tell what they were used for.
Right.
Exactly. Obviously some kind of, eating thing, but it's like, did they use that to finish the prey off? They weren't using it like grappling hooks to just like latch into the side of like a mammoth or something.
Right.
They would definitely break off for that. So, yeah, it's kind of hard to tell exactly what they were using it for, but I feel like in this movie their chins would have gotten in the way. But anyway, we see some primitive dogs as well with the humans.
Yeah, they almost look like coyotes at first
Yeah,
glance.
they basically look like wolves.
Yes.
Stereotypical wolf, but they're with the humans, presumably domesticated.
I mean, does that time frame match up? I mean, do we know when domestication took place?
By 20,000 years, yeah.
Okay.
There wouldn't have been like breeds and things like that yet, but they still would have looked very wolf-like. They still had like floppy ears, like you would expect from a dog,
Gotcha.
instead of a wolf. So, I think those were pretty good. And then the dodos, which, assuming that those ones were supposed to be anteaters and not aardvarks, the dodos are the weirdest one to me. Even without the context of how they were used, even if we just saw a dodo walking around,
these are the ones that were like that had the watermelons and
yes, the conspiracy militia dodos.
Yes.
So dodos are from a single island off the coast of like in the Indo-Pacific. Friend of the pod, Nasai Baraja, is from that island, Mauritius. The dodos are from a single island, and that is it. But
I actually did not know that.
Yeah.
Can we do an episode on dodos?
I don't think... I don't know enough about them to say whether there'd be enough like content for a full episode, but I'll look into it.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so... I'm very confused.
By the dodos?
By the dodos.
I mean, I think the idea is that dodos are supposed to be kind of dopey. They got the funny name. They got
that's sort of the trope with them.
Right, exactly. And so the they were fighting over watermelons and tripping over themselves. It was, I mean, I thought it was a glorious use of a bird that is
known for being no longer here.
right, exactly.
That's like the only famous thing about them is that they're no longer here and that they were probably very tasty.
If you were to ask people, in fact, I almost want to do this, like ask people to name an extinct animal. I imagine every single one of them would say the dodo bird.
I don't think that'd be their go-to.
Really? Dinosaur?
I'd be a dinosaur.
Okay. I'm going to test this now, actually.
Ask your class.
I'm going to ask my class, and then I have another way to do this.
Sure. So that is pretty much, I think those are all of the animals that we saw. Maybe a miscellaneous one or two in the background that I missed, but...
Not particularly relevant.
Right. And so, I don't know, do you have any last thoughts about this movie?
It was, I can appreciate, like I said in the beginning, how they were, how they sort of set up the sequels. I can really appreciate, especially in children's movies, kind of world building. And this... it has been, I just rewatched this one. It's been a while since I've seen any of the sequels.
Yeah.
But just like the idea of, okay, there is, animals living in this ice age and they're going to be in this pack together and da. It is one of those movies that you can watch as an adult and enjoy. And I forget what this is rated. Is this a PG?
Yeah.
Probably PG. Yeah. So, I think it's reasonably difficult to make a G-rated movie
that
adults can enjoy. I could probably name one or two if I thought about it, but I think it's hard to do. This is, when it comes to PG movies that are made for kids, 100%. This is a fun movie to watch, to reminisce, and maybe in 100 episodes when we have 169, maybe we do one of the sequels or something. I'm not exactly sure, but this is absolutely a fun movie. That's you could sit down with kind of people of all ages. I will say this though. For the most, I am not a particular critic of this or anything. There is a little bit of animation in this, specifically some of the water scenes, where it's like...
It doesn't look great.
I'm sure this looked phenomenal in 2002, and now I look at it, I'm like, some dude on YouTube with, a Red Bull in 48 hours could do better than that. But even still, it's only...
It was 20 years ago.
Right. It was a couple select scenes. Certainly didn't take away from the movie at all, but just kind of something to point out. I do enjoy going back and watching the peak of cinema, however many years later, and
so I had forgotten. It had been probably over 10 years since I've seen this movie. I'd forgotten how much I genuinely love this movie. I must have watched this so much as a kid because I could, as I was watching, I was like, I know every line verbatim.
Really? Even after all these years?
Pretty close.
Okay.
So that's some deep internalized stuff that I probably need to work out with therapy. But I forgot how much I love this movie, despite all of its very inaccurate parts. Right.
Such
a good movie.
And that's part of what makes it fun. The deviations from the scientifically accurate are part of it. a part of it makes it fun that, but, a comparison I would make in a very different kind of movie, but to the movie Armageddon, like that's a movie that's not trying to be scientifically accurate.
That's fair.
Okay.
We're here to see an asteroid blow up.
Right. I think one of my favorite quotes for any movie coming from Armageddon was I forget who it was. Ben Affleck was doing an interview afterwards. Mm-hmm. He's like, so I went to Michael Bay, who was the director, and he's like, wouldn't it be easier to have astronauts learn how to become oil drillers than oil drillers learn how to become astronauts? And Michael Bay told me to shut the F up. So that was the end of that conversation. and it is, there are certain movies that really do disservices when things are not scientifically accurate. This is not one of those movies. This was a fun movie, and all of the liberties they took, I think, fit well, and and again, really make for a compelling piece of world building for an hour, and this was an 80-minute movie essentially. For an 80-minute children's movie that sets up a whole franchise coming up afterwards. So this was this was well done, and the liberties that were taken were done well.
So with that, I think we're done talking about the movie, but Mike and I have a question.
Yeah.
Because, so in our various adventures today driving around, we've seen a good chunk of California today. And so we came across a random road sign. So it wasn't like a big billboard or anything. It was the kind of like yard sign that you would put up if you were like supporting a local candidate for like a school board or something.
Town dog catcher.
Sure. And all it said was, do gorillas lay eggs?
I mean, I think we're the podcast to answer this question.
I have not stopped thinking about that for the past, 12 hours.
We're the podcast to answer this question, though. So, Gavin, do gorillas lay eggs?
No. Not in the way you're thinking about it.
Do they in a different way, I'm thinking?
In the sense that, the females have eggs that are fertilized by sperm, yes. But as in terms of laying eggs, no.
They lay fertilized eggs after gestation?
I guess. And so we and spoilers, we actually did, at least I think I figured out what it was. There was some gorilla themed restaurant or something.
It is better not
a ways down the road. That
I
was
wish
like
we
a
didn't even
breakfast
see that.
diner place.
I wish we didn't even see that.
I'm not going to lie to the people. I'm not going to lie to the people. But yeah, so it was probably just an ad. Like the people who own that restaurant probably lived in that house. We're like, free marketing. But we thought that was a fun thing from our journeys today.
It was very fun. And Gavin, I will say this on the podcast. This is my first time ever leaving I went to whatever is east of the Eastern time zone once. But
that would be Central time zone.
Nope, that's west.
Well,
other direction. I went to Puerto Rico
right.
once.
I don't know what that one's called.
I forget what that one's called. I went there once, but because of the way daylight savings time works there, I didn't have to change my clock. This is the first time I have ever traveled west of the Eastern time zone. First time I had to change my clock. And if you ever have the chance to go to California and tour some of the national parks, or just to see Gavin, make it a point to do so. This was absolutely fun. And Gavin, thank you for having me out here. Thank you for being such a wonderful host. As well as Gavin's fiance, who has been very quietly listening on the top bunk of our hotel room as we've been recording this.
Yeah, so we actually got to see the world's largest tree.
By volume and by weight.
Yes.
Not by height, by age. We saw the
I don't remember what the other one was.
It was width, which we did see that one, because that was...
yes, that was the other.
So General Sherman is the first one.
Yep.
General Sherman tree, which was largest by volume and weight, and then we saw General Grant.
Yes.
Both in Sequoia?
General Grant was in Kings Canyon.
Okay. Which are essentially connected, or close to it.
Yep.
And so, yeah, if you guys ever get the chance, if you have the chance to...
super cool.
To come out and travel, absolutely make it a point to do so.
And however big you think that tree is, it's bigger.
It's huge. It's huge.
That's all I've got.
That is all I have, too. This has been the nicest episode of all, episode 69 of I Wish You Were Dead, a podcast about things that used to be alive. We should be back next week with a more typical podcast, but until then, take care, everybody.